Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are here to give you the essential knowledge you need, fast, pulled directly from a specific stack of sources. Today, we're embarking on a pretty wide-ranging, insightful exploration of the Sikh faith. We've collected a number of articles, mainly from the SikhReview, that give you a really profound look into the theological heart, the historical journey, and the contemporary challenges of this community.
And our mission today is pretty comprehensive. We want to distill the essence of Sikh wisdom for you, the learner. We're going to be focusing on core principles like universalism, the internal quest for peace, and that guiding light, the spiritual resilience that's known as Chardi Kala.
Right. And the sources give us this remarkable dual focus. We're going to trace the individual's inner spiritual battle, what the Gurbani actually calls the fight against the wandering mind.
And then we connect that.
And then we connect that exact internal discipline to the community's, well, dramatic historical fight for survival and the defense of universal human rights.
Exactly. It's the synthesis of the inner life and outward ethical action that is just so compelling.
It really is.
If you can understand that internal discipline, the spiritual foundations, then the historical resolve we're going to discuss just makes complete sense. We have to start at the beginning, though. Over 5 centuries ago, with Guru Nanak, the founder.
Okay, let's unpack this. Guru Nanak, born in 1469, is often called the people's prophet. And he didn't just articulate a new religious idea. He put forward this revolutionary social and theological concept, the absolute oneness of God.
Which then implies the unity of all humanity and, by extension, the fundamental equality of all faiths.
And this concept of unity wasn't just theoretical, was it? It became instantly and, dramatically clear during the foundational moment of his spiritual enlightenment at the Bain River in Punjab.
Right. When he emerged, he issued this very simple but incredibly powerful declaration. There is no Hindu and there is no Muslim.
It must have just completely dismantled the religious boundaries and the sectarian strife at the time, didn't it?
It did.
And this declaration wasn't about creating some new hybrid religion. It was about saying that true faith is measured by your ethical conduct, by pure practice, truthfulness, honesty, charity, and maybe above all, kindness.
Exactly. He taught that if you live a life of virtue and ethical discipline, your religious label is secondary. He took this practical, non-ritualistic approach directly into the concept of worship itself. Which brings us to the beautiful concept of the cosmic arti.
I found this description fascinating. So when Guru Nanak visited the famous Jagannath Puri temple, he famously refused to participate in the traditional, ritualized idol worship.
He did, and instead he composed a hymn that completely redefines worship. He argued that God doesn't need our human rituals. The entire universe is already performing this arti, this prayer service. The sky is the ceremonial platter. The sun and moon are the lamps. The stars are the pearls.
And the wind is the ceremonial fan.
Yes.
What that does is it shifts devotion entirely. It moves it from this fixed, localized ritual that's controlled by priests to a continuous, cosmic, non-exclusive phenomenon. It tells you that the divine isn't limited to any physical form or structure. His light is in everything.
And if that light illuminates everything, then every living being holds a piece of that divine spark. That brings us to the ethical heart of this foundation, which is so beautifully captured in the wisdom of Sheikh Faridji. His concluding salaks, they really emphasize humility and kindness.
There's a specific line here that serves as a perfect ethical rule for how we should treat other people. Do not break anyone's heart, because all living beings are priceless jewels.
That phrase underpins the entire ethical system: to be deeply compassionate, to be non-judgmental, because every single individual is irreplaceable and valuable. But this compassion, it's easy to offer outwardly, but it requires a tremendous inward fight.
Which is the perfect segue to our second major theme. That spiritual perfection you mentioned requires wrestling with this huge, persistent, internal enemy, the mind itself. So let's move to the inner landscape. Most Western philosophy, you go back to Descartes, it elevates thought. I think, therefore I am. But the Gurbani is much more cautious about that thought process.
It is. The Gurbani sees the human mind as inherently fickle, restless, and deeply problematic. We see this in the scripture itself. And just for clarity for you, our listener, when we cite SGGS, we're referring to the Sri Guru Granth Sahib, which is the sacred central text of the Sikh faith. And the SGGS says, "Oh mother, my mind is out of control. Night and day it runs after the material world. How can I restrain it?"
The mind is basically an exquisite personal time-traveling machine, isn't it? It's never fully present. It's either stuck in past grievances or worrying about future uncertainties, constantly chasing these fleeting material things that just never provide lasting satisfaction.
And Guru Nanak demonstrated this perfectly with an anecdote about true presence. When he was invited to join the namaz prayer, he just stood there silent. When the Nawab challenged him, the Guru revealed that the Nawab's mind was off in Kandahar, thinking about buying horses, while the Qazi's mind was at home, worrying about his newborn colt.
It's a brilliant practical illustration that distraction ruins true spiritual practice. If your mind isn't there, the physical act is basically useless. But what is it that's driving this fickle, constantly distracted mind? The Gurbani breaks down the material world's influence into these three forces that keep the spirit bound, the ones known as the gunas.
These three gunas are key to understanding why we feel so out of control. You can think of them as three different energy states or filters through which the mind sees reality, and they really define our material existence.
Can you walk us through them, maybe with a more practical context? They sound a bit abstract.
Certainly. So first, there's Rajgun, or passion. This is the energy that drives ambition, desire, and activity, but it always leads to anxiety and worry about the outcome. Then there's Tamgun, or ignorance. This is the negative force. It manifests as lust, greed, anger, pride. It's the energy of inertia and, frankly, destruction.
Okay, so those two are the main culprits creating all the chaos. What about the third one?
The third is Satgun, or goodness. This covers the positive traits like compassion, humility, peacefulness. And it sounds good, right? It is the highest state within the material world. However, the teaching states that even Satgun is a form of bondage. Because if you cling to the feeling of being good or virtuous, it just feeds the ego. So the mind is constantly victimized by drowning in these three worldly oceans.
That's a deep distinction. It means true peace isn't about being good, but about transcending all three of these energies completely. So if the mind is inherently out of control, what's the remedy?
The remedy is to renounce the mind's cleverness, all the intellectual gymnastics it does to justify its restless behavior. The ultimate goal is to achieve sahaj, this state of intuitive poise or spiritual rest. But it's not about being passive. It's about achieving that stilled, calm state where the mind stops creating all that unnecessary negative noise.
Wait, spiritual rest sounds like giving up. How is sahaj different from just checking out or giving up the fight against the gunas?
That's a great clarifying question. It is an extremely active process. It's not checking out, it's checking in. Kabir Ji gives us the perfect metaphor for this active control. He talks about making self-reflection my mount, and in the stirrups of intuitive poise, I placed my feet.
Ah, so you become the rider. The mind is the horse, and you, the self, are the rider.
Exactly. You're constantly observing and monitoring the horse's flight. When the mind tries to run off into anxiety or ambition, you gently steer it back home, within, reminding it, "Where are you going, O mind? Come back. Remain in your own home." It's a sustained discipline of paying attention to your attention until you get that inner stability and are no longer afflicted by sorrow. That is the inner journey to find rest.
That inner discipline taming the self is enormous. But how did that inner resolve translate into an unbreakable will during centuries of just overwhelming external conflict? Let's pivot now to the historical challenges the community faced, showing how that spiritual discipline really manifests as a fearless resolve. We should start with the era of supreme martyrdom.
This is where the internal philosophy becomes physical action. We have to discuss Guru Tegh Bahadur, the ninth guru, martyred in 1675. His poetry, the Suluk Mala 9, it really explores that battle between illusion and reality, preparing the community for exactly the kind of confrontation that cost him his life.
And this event is still a very significant debate among historians. Some accounts, particularly the later Persian sources, describe the guru as fermenting rebellion.
However, the Sikh accounts consistently stress a deliberate moral decision. Guru Tegh Bahadur chose to stand up for universal human rights, specifically the freedom of religious practice of non-Sikhs. In this case, it was for Kashmiri Hindus, against the tyranny of the Mughal ruler Aurangzeb.
It's the ultimate expression of Chardi Kala, the welfare of all humanity, sacrificing yourself for the rights of those outside your own community. Some scholars argue this laid a foundation for modern ideas of defending freedom of conscience, predating a lot of European Enlightenment concepts.
It transformed suffering into a passage for deeper faith, and it demonstrated that courage born of inner peace simply cannot be defeated by external violence. That moral resistance paved the way for staggering military resilience, especially after the era of the 10th guru, Guru Gobind Singh.
And we see that resilience tested to its absolute limit.
Yeah.
During the Battle of Saragarhi, the Great Massacre in 1762, Ahmad Shah Abdali, the Afghan invader, launched his sixth invasion with the specific brutal aim of just annihilating the Sikh community.
The scale of that tragedy is it's heartbreaking. Abdali launched a sudden, overwhelming attack near Kup Malar Kotla. The Sikh forces were caught trying to protect this massive caravan of their women, children, and non-combatants. In a single day, the sources confirm somewhere between 20 to 25,000 Sikhs were slaughtered.
The magnitude of that loss is so hard to comprehend. But the immediate aftermath showed this almost superhuman defiant spirit. Abdali, thinking he had broken their will, followed up by desecrating their holiest site, the Darbar Sahib in Amritsar, blowing it up, filling the sacred pool, the Amrit Sarovar, with debris and cow entrails.
And here is the astonishing resilience. Within 10 weeks of this massacre and desecration, the remaining Sikhs reorganized and defeated Abdali's forces. After Abdali retreated, they famously compelled the Afghans who had defiled the holy site to excavate the debris from the Sarovar themselves. They were back on their feet, rebuilding, capturing territory, minting their own coin almost immediately.
Their will just seemed unbreakable. And that same unyielding bravery shows up decades later, in 1897, at the Battle of Saragarhi, a story of phenomenal sacrifice.
It is truly legendary. This time, it was just 21 Sikh soldiers defending a small communication post against a massive force estimated to be between 10 and 15,000 Afghan tribesmen.
And they chose death over surrender. They held the post for over 6 hours and inflicted just tremendous casualties. Every single man was killed, but their sacrifice transformed that tiny outpost into a symbol of incredible, almost mythical bravery rooted in their spiritual preparation.
All 21 were posthumously awarded the Indian Order of Merit. It's the ultimate historical evidence of how deep spiritual commitment translates into physical fearlessness.
So we have this profound philosophical foundation, centuries of historical resolve. Now let's tie this into the modern experience and that core concept we mentioned at the start, Chardi Kala.
Chardi Kala is the ever-rising spirit. It's the highest state of mind. And importantly, the sources define it not as superficial happiness or some kind of material optimism, but as spiritual resilience anchored in divine trust. Trust in hukam, the divine will, and inner contentment, santok. It is, poetically, the spiritual optimism that sings even through tears.
That inner contentment, santok, is essential here. The research points out that dissatisfaction doesn't come from what you lack, but from comparing yourself to others. Contentment releases you from that toxic comparison trap.
And that ties right back to part 2, Taming the Wandering Mind. If your contentment is rooted internally, external circumstances can't shake you. The sources use the Bhagat Namdev metaphor. The kite flyer laughs and talks with friends, but he remains fully attentive to the string connecting him to the kite. That string is the divine. You operate in the world, but you are not of the world.
That makes perfect sense. But applying these ancient concepts today is complicated, especially for Sikh youth navigating these modern, hybrid identities. The research talks about a current crisis of imagination, especially in the diaspora.
Yeah, this crisis manifests as confusion over cultural norms, a gradual erosion of knowledge transmission between generations, and critically, ambivalence about visible Sikh identity. Experts are now urging the community to reframe this not as a crisis, but as an identity opportunity.
That's a powerful and necessary reframing. So, what are the suggested solutions? How do you modernize this transmission?
Well, the solutions require building bridges between the past and the present. They emphasize empowering youth to question established dogmas and, crucially, presenting new role models. The community needs to highlight successful Sikh professionals, like, for example, an observant Sikh serving as president of the World Bank, as more effective examples of lived values than, say, semi-literate preachers.
And beyond just external communication, the sources also stress the need for internal changes that must happen to reflect Guru Nanak's foundational idea of universal equality.
Absolutely. The community has to actively address issues that contradict the faith's egalitarian foundations. The sources specifically point out gender inequality, the regrettable fact that Sikh women are still often not allowed to recite Gurbani or carry the palki, which is the ceremonial palanquin holding the sacred scripture, in the sanctum sanctorum of the Darbar Sahib in Amritsar.
That is a stark contrast to the original tenets of absolute equality. And related to that, there's an urgent need for academically excellent educational institutions that truly inculcate Sikh values, so families don't have to seek alternatives elsewhere.
But when these spiritual and ethical foundations are truly active, you see Chardi Kala demonstrated in collective action. I mean, look at the recent devastating floods in Punjab. Despite administrative failures and widespread loss, gurdwaras immediately opened their doors for shelter and langar, the free communal kitchen.
That is seva and sarbatabala, selfless service for the welfare of all humanity in action. The sources highlight that in the absence of external support, Punjabis did not wait passively. They stood shoulder to shoulder, transforming collective suffering into solidarity and relentless help. That is the spirit of Chardi Kala lived out.
So if we synthesize this entire journey for you, the learner, this deep dive shows that the Sikh tradition requires a continuous, integrated engagement. It demands that you tame the wandering mind for internal peace, for sahaj, that you maintain gratitude for everything, even simple comforts, and translate that inner strength into fearless ethical action and resilience, into Chardi Kala, in the outer world.
And the knowledge you can glean from these articles provides a complete framework for living a virtuous and fearless life. It urges us to view setbacks, even catastrophic ones, not as ultimate failures, but as passages to deeper faith and the refinement of character, just as Guru Tegh Bahadur's sacrifice taught us.
Which leaves us with our final thought for your reflection. The scripture asks us these profound questions about mortality. Guru Arjan Sahib reminds us, "O human, you came here to earn a profit. If life is a temporary journey and everything you cling to is perishable like a fading dream, how will you reevaluate your life's purpose and actions today to ensure you are earning that true spiritual profit before your life's journey concludes?"